Welcome to The Other Side of the Curve, Thinking Strategically in the Reset. My name is Jamie Headley, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator for today's webinar. I'm excited we have assembled an expert panel of local leaders, all who run on EOS, to share their perspectives from the lenses of people, finance, technology, and business. If you're not familiar with EOS, that's okay. Everybody is welcome here. For those who don't know, EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system. It's a proven process for helping businesses grow. We do have a great panelist here, David Bowman, who's happy to fill you in and give you information about EOS for Life, but that's not our purpose today. First day is here is just to hopefully help people reset. So today we are going to share insights on 3 different topics: navigating our current reality, prediction on life post-quarantine, and prepping your organization for the reset. I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves momentarily. But first, if you have questions, we're going to have you use the Q&A function. You can find this by rolling your mouse over your Zoom screen, and a ribbon should appear at the bottom and you'll see a Q&A box. If you have a question specifically for a panelist, you can put their name. You should see their names up here on the screen when they're speaking. If it's for anybody, you can just put any and then type your question in, and I will get your question over to the panelist. If we run out of time, you can reach out to people offline and continue conversations there. We can also schedule another webinar if we need to. And this is being recorded so that you can share with people or review it at a later date. So let's get started, and I'll have you meet our panelists. We're going to start with our people-focused lens. So Brian, how about you kick off?
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Bellware, an employee benefit consultant with Gibson, and we are a regional risk management firm operating locally here in West Michigan and throughout Indiana. And I work with business leaders to purchase high quality, affordable healthcare so that they can take care of their people. We are really excited to join the other EOS panelists today, and we've been in EOS business for about 4 years. Joining me from the Gibson team is Melissa Ricks. So I'll turn it over to Melissa for an introduction.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Ricks. I'm the Benefits Compliance Specialist at Gibson. I'm also an attorney by trade. So I'll be talking a little bit this morning about some of the legislative changes we've been seeing and we've been helping our clients with. And so being an attorney really kind of helps you dive through all of those legislative changes and updates. So I'm excited to be with you this morning.
Good morning, everyone. John Brickner from HR Collaborative. I am the Thriving Workplace Architect, and HR Collaborative helps leaders and business owners get unstuck from their systemic people challenges and create workplaces where everyone can thrive. And we've been on EOS for about 2 years now.
Jason?
Yeah, Jason Martin, a partner at Cole Gavlis here in Portage, Michigan. We've been on EOS for about 10 plus years as a firm. And our focus is helping entrepreneurs succeed, and we work with small businesses and not-for-profits in Kalamazoo.
Good morning, I'm Tim Kilmartin from Southern Michigan Bank and Trust, full-service bank serving Southwest Michigan. I am a commercial lender, and I've been associated with EOS companies for probably the last 6 or 7 years. We've been helping companies quite a bit through this trying time, and look forward to working with them into the future.
Kyle.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Kyle Paalman. I'm the president and co-founder of NuWave Technology Partners. NuWave is a managed IT services company. Excited to say we're celebrating our 15th year in business this year. And we've been on EOS for just over 3 years. We primarily support our clients in one of 2 ways. So we either have clients who completely outsource their IT department to NuWave, and then others who augment their IT, either an IT person or an IT department. We're headquartered in Kalamazoo, and we also have offices in Grand Rapids and Lansing. And our core focus is helping people through simple, secure, and reliable technology.
Marc.
Good morning. I'm Marc Kettle from the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center. I reside in Southwest Michigan and serve the 7 Southwest Michigan counties. I am a strong EOS advocate and proud to be a member of this Trusted Advisor Network. I embrace the EOS leadership principles of virtual tracking organizer, the 6 key elements, and the level 10 meetings, to name a few. And I'm glad to be a part of this network.
Mr. Bowman.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is David Bowman. I'm a professional EOS implementer with Nexus Business Solutions, and we help business leaders and owners get what they want and they deserve from their business by doing three things that we call vision, traction, and healthy. How do you take a leadership team and get them absolutely 100% on the same page with where an organization wants to go? How do you create traction from the standpoint of discipline and accountability in the organization to execute on that vision? And then healthy, how do you create a open, honest, fun-loving, truly engaged leadership team that's transparent and non-political? So can't think of a better time to be talking about this kind of topic. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, those are our panelists. So let's begin our discussion. Our first topic, resources for navigating our current reality. This is certainly a heavy people issue. So Melissa, can you kick us off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Navigating our current reality, especially at Gibson with our employee benefits team, and my particular role as a benefits compliance specialist, has really been focused on the recent passage of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA, since it was signed into law just 3 weeks ago. Specifically, we've been focusing on the paid leave portions, which include the emergency paid leave and the emergency FMLA. So as a quick overview, which many of you have probably already been focused on this topic quite a bit, but as a quick overview, public employers of any size and private employers with under 500 employees must provide emergency paid sick leave to all of their employees and emergency FMLA to employees who have been employed at least 30 days. There are 5 main reasons to qualify for emergency paid sick leave and 1 reason to qualify for emergency FMLA. The leaves are available from April 1st until December 31st, 2020. Employers have a lot of questions about how these laws are relating to their businesses, including the application of the laws to their business, which employees qualify for leave, how you go about documenting requests for leave, related tax credits, how furloughs, layoffs, and business closures may impact the FFCRA paid leaves, and the interaction with traditional FMLA. So one of the most common questions that I've been helping employers with recently is the interaction between traditional FMLA and the emergency FMLA that's available in the FFCRA. The Department of Labor has issued guidance on this, specifically saying that an employee is entitled to 12 weeks of FMLA combined with total FMLA and your emergency FMLA. So for example, if you have an employee who has already used 4 weeks of traditional FMLA to recover from surgery, the employee would only be entitled to 8 weeks of emergency FMLA. Luckily, as we've been going through the last 3 weeks, the Department of Labor and the Internal Revenue Service have been issuing lots of Q&As and guidance, and including some temporary rules to address outstanding issues that employers are dealing with. As of this morning, the Department of Labor has issued 79 Q&As and a temporary rule to implement the FFCRA, and the IRS has issued 66 FAQs. So I would encourage employers to check out the DOL website and the IRS website to review agency guidance and keep up to date, because they're publishing additional guidance at a particularly quick rate. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Melissa. Tim, how about some thoughts from the finance side?
Well, also as part of the CARES Act, as I'm sure everybody is well aware, the Congress provided $349 billion to the Paycheck Protection program, which is designed to help companies continue to pay their employees, even though their businesses may be stopped or slowed down considerably. The program has been evolving as the last 2 weeks have gone on, and there are some banks that are well into the process. There are some banks that are just starting the process. The funds are being allocated very quickly. The Senate yesterday was not successful in adding another $200 billion to the pot. So per Congressman Fred Upton, they estimate the pool will be allocated maybe as quickly as this Sunday. So if this is something that you are interested in and have not yet talked to your banker about, I suggest you do that. Basically, it provides 8 weeks of payroll and payroll-related expenses. Part of this money can also be used toward utilities, rent, mortgage interest. And if at least 75% of the funds that you borrow under this SBA program are used for those payroll items, that loan can be forgiven. So it turns into a grant. So it's a very powerful program. I would say talk to your banker right away if you haven't. Hopefully they will continue to fund it. I know banks will be working through the weekend trying to get through the system. SBA continues to provide guidance on a daily basis in terms of how the program is being administered, how banks will document it. That's kind of the next step for us is, now that we've gotten authorizations, how do we document it? And then the second critical piece is going to be, once you get the funds, really accurately track what you do with the money, because that will be critical when it comes time to seek forgiveness of that loan. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Tim. Jason, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. What we realized with working with the bankers is the complexity of what we're going to need to track coming out of this reset. We have remote workers, so how do we maintain the cohesive leadership team and cohesive team and keep the communication lines open? We have lots of phone calls with clients to go over the pros and cons of the PPP Act. A lot of clients have people on unemployment. When is it still a good idea for people to come off unemployment and then apply for the PPP loan? So we've had a lot of conversations with our clients about the pros and cons of each option that you do have. A lot of no face-to-face meetings. We're using Zoom and other forms of digital messaging for meetings. The tax line deadline has been extended to July 15th. So tax returns are coming in slower. So we're not seeing a rush. People are staying home. So getting information to us has been slower than normal. And we're getting an electronic format instead of people dropping off things at the front door. So yeah, there's just a lot of complexities going on in the world right now on the accounting side of things. People are slower to get things done because there's no rush because the tax deadlines move forward. But we're always here to help for communication and to go over your options for the PPP loans. And we work directly with banks and the insurance companies so we can help your risk assessments that way too. So thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Jason. Kyle, how about your thoughts from the tech side?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say the most critical thing that we're seeing business leaders trying to navigate are the cybersecurity threats that are really been introduced from people moving from the business network to the home office network. So just the security of your business network and all sorts of new cyber vulnerabilities. We've kind of broken that down into 3 buckets of risk. So first, you have the device that you're using. Looking at that, is it a personally managed device or is it a corporate managed device? And that device that you're using in your home network, is it patched? Does it have a firewall enabled? Is it running endpoint protection? And is it encrypted? Looking at from the network that you're connecting to on your home network is that wireless network, is it password protected or is it wide open Wi-Fi? And is that network managed by your corporate IT or is it managed by your 14-year-old child? As often we see. When we're looking at the office network that you're connecting to, how is the security enabled that you're connecting to that office? So are you using open RDP ports or secure remote desktop gateways? Are you connecting via VPN directly into the server, your corporate server? You think about, if I'm connecting directly into my corporate server from my home office network, all of those vulnerabilities that are sitting on my personal home device now are sitting on your corporate network and introducing all sorts of threats. So that's something that our businesses are navigating. Some best practices I'd like to throw out there for business owners is, first and foremost, enable multi-factor authentication. So quickly, what is multi-factor authentication? It's the idea of a second form of authentication beyond your password. So simple things like fingerprint readers, RFA tokens is kind of an old way of doing it, but today most everybody's familiar with a text message or a phone call with a code. Microsoft has said that multi-factor authentication is the single most important security measure a business can take, and that 99.9% of all account compromises could be prevented simply by enabling multi-factor authentication. If possible, separate your home devices from your company devices. If you have kids around, try to prevent them from using your company network, or excuse me, your company device that has company data on it. You like kids, they love installing apps, they love clicking on things, and frankly, the bad guys know this. Another simple measure is enable a DNS filter. So a DNS filter prevents malicious content from websites that you're visiting or compromised websites altogether. We say lock your computer, and even lock your computer while you're working from home. Be absolutely sure which wireless network you're connecting to. And use complex passwords, and also use a password manager to store those complex passwords. Don't ever document those passwords on your computer or in a file on your computer, and never reuse passwords, a very common thing that we see. And then lastly, just make sure that you know where you're know that your data is being backed up. So thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, Kyle. David, how about your thoughts overall on business?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I hope everybody is healthy and everybody's families are doing well during this time. I think the key here and what we're hearing from clients is twofold. The more senior EOS users are saying we wouldn't be able to navigate this without it. Some of my less mature clients in terms of the implementation process are really struggling with how do you create calm out of the chaos, and really now's the time to get back to basics. So my message to teams is that these types of issues, 66 FAQs are coming out every single day. The only thing that doesn't change is the need for leadership. And so I urge you as a leadership team to make sure that you're doing self-care as a team, so that we come out of this as an organization and as a leadership team healthier and stronger and faster on the other side. So the idea is now's not the time to break down the discipline. Don't put off your quarterlies, those types of things, because it's the time to be intentional about what the decisions that you're making in an environment where these decisions are just changing constantly. So leadership is the stabilizing factor for every organization. So in order to do that, though, you probably will need to change and tweak your EOS tools, because you're operating in a very different environment. So I have everything from organizations that are fully on and functioning almost like nothing is happening, to organizations where it's only the leadership team working and they're doing a lot of stirring each other up versus really making sure that they're working on the business during this time. So get back to the basics. Remember your 5 leadership abilities. Now's definitely the time to simplify your organization. Make sure that you're delegating and elevating. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later about this, an idea of a reverse accountability chart that turns the delegate and elevate upside down, so that if you're short-staffed, you have an ability to both work on the organization, but sometimes it could be leaders and managers that are also delivering products and services. And so it kind of changes the concept of delegate and elevate, but it's really useful in helping people get through this process. Keep your predicting up short and long term. So short term, I have clients that are going to 2 and 3 L10s a week for shorter durations, just because the pace of the change is happening so often. And they can't keep up. So you just make sure as you're going through those that you're getting more and more IDS time. There's something cathartic about just getting issues out on the table as they're happening real time that helps people really prioritize and put things in perspectives. Then long term, as best we can, we got to make sure that when we hit the ground running, when things start to open up, that we've got the right predictions in place and everything's set in terms of every 90 days and beyond. Do take a look at your VTOs. If you need to change some of your financial predictions, then now's the time to do that. If you need to change your annual goals, now's the time to do that. Try to, if possible, make sure that you are keeping the stake in the ground that you set at the beginning of the year. You just have to be a lot more creative coming out of this as to how we're going to make up lost time. And then lastly, the 2 remaining is systematize and structure. Systematize from the standpoint, if we're paying people and we've got some time to make sure that they're busy and productive, which I know sounds weird for some organizations, but it's a challenge when we're paying people to keep them on the payroll, but yet we can't deliver. Great time to look at your core processes and make sure that the training is taking place and that it's being followed by all. And then last, again, the structure, taking a look at your accountability chart, making sure that the key things are getting delivered to your clients. We can talk more about this idea of a reverse accountability chart later in the program. Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, David. We have a quick question here that's come in. There's a lot of acronyms flying around, particularly with the EOS. There was a question here of, what is IDS time?
Okay. So IDS is our root cause analysis process. It's a way of, instead of things getting handled on the fly, that we first populate an issues list. And so generating an issues list is the first part of IDS. And again, that takes a lot of the emotion out of it, starts to think in terms of priority and structure. And then we identify root cause. So the I in IDS is identify. D is discuss. So the hardest part of this is really making sure that before you go to discussion, that you've identified root cause and you're really disciplined and challenging each other to make sure you're dealing with the most important issue at the time. And then solve, if you've done a good discussion and really have created or have clarity around the root cause, then usually it's a couple of different solutions that are in play, and you make sure that you make a decision. 80%, don't try for 100%, don't try for perfection. If you're 80% there, make a decision, move on. So how do you set up the most important things, put them away forever?
Thanks, David. All right, let's move on to our second topic, predictions on post-quarantine life. I know we're all looking forward to that. John, how about you kick us off for that topic?
Certainly. We're coming out of a period of 11 years of economic growth and low unemployment. And we find ourselves in this new unexpected situation. And so I think more important than ever is what I'll call the modern leader. And that requires new ways of being for leadership. What we think is really important is that leaders are collaborative. And I think many of us are used to seeing leaders as the hero, right? They have to know it all. They have to impart that knowledge on everyone around them. And we think that's moving from hero to host. So they really have to be a host because there's great ideas everywhere. There are very competent people around us, and we need everybody's mind on this to solve these problems. So, really collaborating within, setting up the environment to collaborate within the team. Also, they think about competition differently. Right? We all see this right now that people we never thought would be working together are working together. And so this idea that, competitor is a win-lose proposition, but this idea that Simon Sinek talks about in his new book is there's something called a worthy rival, right? So when I look at my competitor as a worthy rival and my weaknesses are their strengths or vice versa, it helps me up my own game. So I think our leaders need to look at their competitors and say, how can they sharpen, how can they help me rethink about my own business? Those modern leaders are a much different mindset. And that also brings up a third point, which is, that return to emotional intelligence and really thinking development is going to become as important as skill development. So we're so used to thinking about these individual competencies, but now a leader's ability to sense and pause and respond and activate the right, the right initiatives is going to be more important than the individual skills. So it's going to be as important, let's just say. So that evolving leadership construct, but also what I'll call the always-on organization. I think we're proving that people can work from home effectively and they can be productive. So as Kyle talked about, lots of infrastructure. Our leaders can no longer say, do as I say, not as I do. They have to be using the technology. They have to be advocates for the technology and engage the team through the technology. So that's becoming more important. And also just rethinking your mix of talent. So as you come back in, budgets will be leaner, cash flow will be different. So thinking about one of the models we use is build, buy, borrow, and bot. So what do you need to build internally to get to accomplish the goals? What can you buy in the marketplace? So think recruiting. Borrow would be where do you need a consultant or a gig worker? How do you augment what you have to get the job done? And then bot is simply those automation tasks. So what tasks are you automating, or what are you using AI for so that your work is the resources you do have are focused on the right things. Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, John. That was great. Brian, anything to add?
Yeah, well, Jamie, I don't have any predictions of when the post-quarantine chapter will start, but I do feel confident making one key prediction relative to employee benefits, and that's this: the price of health insurance is going to rise. And I say that a bit tongue-in-cheek, just because regardless of COVID-19, the price of health insurance is going to rise, just as they have every year since 1999. And the reason the price of health insurance is rising is because the cost of healthcare is rising. Health insurance is simply a byproduct of the cost of healthcare. So when you have a public health crisis that's driving increased healthcare utilization, it's only going to intensify that 20-year trend of rising health insurance prices. In fact, a recent study by Covered California projects COVID-19 alone will drive increases in the national commercial market premiums anywhere from 4 to as high as 40%, assuming there's no federal intervention. Now, obviously, that's a big variance and reflects the significant uncertainty from insurers in two key areas. Number one is just the financial impact of COVID-19 treatment. We don't know what that's going to look like. And number two is the impact relative to elective surgeries being delayed due to quarantine measures. So that uncertainty is likely to result in underwriters taking a very conservative approach in their rating methodology, and the way they will protect against potential future losses is through higher premiums. And we would expect that both in the fully insured market as well as in the stop loss market for self-insured employers. All of that being said, those projections are all at an aggregate level. What really matters is not necessarily what happens at the national or even state level. What really matters is the underlying risk within each employer's health plan and how their specific health plan is managing that risk. So my real prediction is this: the negative financial impact of COVID-19 on businesses is going to and should drive leaders to begin managing the supply chain of their healthcare spend with the same diligence as they do every other aspect of their business in order to lower the cost of what is likely a top 3 business expense. Thanks, Jamie.
Wow, thanks, Brian. Jason, any predictions from the tax perspective?
Well, for the tax and accounting perspective, we're going to see more remote workers realizing that some jobs might be from home for now. Like our bookkeeping staff is probably going to work from home for the majority of the time, which then businesses are going to start to reevaluate the need for brick and mortar buildings. Do they need as much space as they've used in the past? We're going to have more meetings held virtually. We're going to have clients that are going to switch from paper checks and use more services like bill.com, where they actually approve the invoices and such online, and then bill.com will send the payments out. So we're not relying on an individual or an approver to sign checks. You don't have to worry about 2 people signing a check. So the need for people being in the office will be lowered due to this, which is probably a better thing because it makes our accounting jobs more efficient and more functional, and we won't have to worry about meeting face-to-face, picking up and delivering items to clients. And then other things that we're thinking about is preparing for the payroll issues with PPP loans, the EFMLA documentation, payroll tax credits. We're going to be in contact with our clients to discuss what items need to be set up in QuickBooks or what things need to be set up in ADP so that the record keeping is right when we're ready to do the information that's needed to give to the bankers, so we can make sure that we are getting the full forgiveness of the loans when it comes time to report on that. As we prepare for our workforce to come back, is our building set up for the space required? Are we properly sanitized and clean? is the work environment safe for our staff as they come back? Those are things that we're going to think about as we're coming back to work after this crisis. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Jason. Kyle, I know you've got to have some pretty intense predictions regarding technology.
Yeah, thank you. I think everybody's kind of talked about the fact that we see people, the reality is that people will likely want to work from home after this. They've been proven that. So one of the things that we've seen organizations, they're already looking at this, but they found themselves in a situation where they were unable to rapidly respond. They were unable to get their people properly working from home and give them access to everything they needed. I laid next to in my chiropractor bed that a woman said, yeah, finally a week and a half later, I have access to my files. So that's what everybody's their reality is. Slow VPN connections. They had a lot of clients who were sending callers to a voicemail box and then having staff throughout the day check that voicemail box and try to call customers back. And frankly, just a lot of companies had to shut down altogether because they had no solution. So yeah, my prediction is companies are going to want to be prepared for that next coronavirus scenario. They're going to be looking for solutions that really allow their employees to work from anywhere, have full access to the corporate network, all of their files, and really any time and from any device. They're going to be looking for solutions that from their business telephone system. How do they take that phone that sits on their desk and redeploy that quickly to the home office environment without any disruption or and without losing continuity to talking to their clients. And they're also going to be looking for better collaboration types of tools. So how do I instant message, chat? How do I share video between my clients? And really having those tools will both work in the office, but also working from a home office scenario. When we're talking security, I see with everybody with this reality that everybody's talking about is employees are going to want to work from home. Companies are going to want to enable it. Going back to my previous conversation about security is how do we simply and affordably really secure that home office environment. So companies are going to be looking for solutions, allow other people to work from home, but also they need to protect their corporate network and they need to protect that proprietary data that lives on that corporate network. So thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, Kyle. Mark, as a previous business owner, what are your predictions?
Thank you, Jamie. I just have a few brief comments. First of all, we have to take a look, we as our manufacturing sector has to take a look at broadening our supplier base domestically. As you can imagine, we have seen articles recently where India is now not exporting that pharmaceutical drug that is supposed to help the COVID-19 as a remedy. And so we need to take a look domestically on how we can spread out our supplier base and have more suppliers. We recently worked with some local companies who have had their demand increase appreciably, and they were not prepared to meet the need with regard to having enough suppliers, such as PPE and hospital beds and that type of thing. Secondly, I think the manufacturing sector has to look at how they lay out their plants with the advent of social distancing. We might have to do plant layout revisions to make sure that if and when or all the time we end up having to keep a social distance within the manufacturing workspace, there's a need to relook at that and make sure that we're prepared for that. Along with that, looking at the needs of what the manufacturers are going to need to do to keep their workplace safe, the amount of PPE that they're going to have to consider purchasing on an ongoing basis, such as the masks and shields, whether it be every day or when needed. That's just going to be a new reality in the workforce. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, let's move on to the third topic, prepping for the reset. And Tim, why don't you kick this one off?
Sure, thanks, Jamie. One of the things that has become apparent through this recent events is that well-managed companies like EOS companies are planning around this. This is a variable that they're dealing with. They're not counting on the PPP loans. Their planning is that they don't get it. If they get it, that's great, but they're not going to let that stop them. So continue to actively manage the company and plan for those things. The other thing I would say is, your equity on your balance sheet is your rainy day fund. And things have been so good for so long, people didn't bother to build a rainy day fund or an equity, and that's really starting to affect them now. So, you know, just like when you're looking at material and labor, think of profit as a raw ingredient of your business. So you can build an equity base, you can build a rainy day fund. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Tim. Melissa, what are your thoughts on prepping for the reset?
So one of the important things that you'll have to do on looking at the reset is addressing any documentation and record keeping for those paid leaves under the Families First Coronavirus Act and any of the tax credits that go along with it. The DOL and the IRS are very possibly going to audit for those. So you want to make sure you've got the proper documentation, and documentation needs to be maintained for at least 4 years after the leaves are and the tax credits have been processed. The other thing that you want to think about is communicating with your employees regarding their benefits when we restart. So if you've had employees who are on layoff, or you've had to close your business or part of your business, have you maintained benefits while those employees have been on furlough or layoff, or have you put them on COBRA and now you're bringing them back to work? So just maintain that communication with your employees on how their benefits are impacted, because that's something that's going to be true to the heart of everyone that's going through this crisis. Another thing that I would say is keep an eye on a couple of the things that were in the CARES Act. There's a couple of things that sort of flew under the radar. So one of those is an additional student loan repayment program that allows employers to provide additional payments for their employees' student loans. And this section is originally set to expire December 31st. However, we expect to see either an extension of that or a permanent provision that would allow employers to do that on a permanent basis, because there's widespread support for that provision. There's also another provision in the CARES Act that touches on HSAs, health savings accounts, and telemedicine, and that has been extended until December 31st of 2021. However, based on, again, use of telemedicine in this current pandemic and widespread bipartisan support, we're likely to see an extension or full repeal of that expiration date. And then another thing to kind of keep on our radar, especially since we've got now paid emergency sick leave and paid emergency FMLA, is the expansion on the federal level of paid traditional FMLA. So I think we're going to start to see those things in the future, and just a few things for our employers to keep their eyes on. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Melissa. Actually, we have a question for you. So if I have an employee that uses the 2 weeks of emergency paid leave to self-quarantine, then they need to stay home longer because they are still sick. My understanding is that the PMLA is only 10 weeks of paid leave. I assume that's FMLA. The first 2 weeks being treated as a waiting period, with the 2 weeks of emergency paid leave bypass the waiting period.
So that's a complicated question, and this is something that we could probably spend all day discussing all the ins and outs. But the quick answer is the emergency. If you yourself are sick, the portion that provides paid leave to you is just the first 2 weeks of emergency paid sick leave. So it's just 2 weeks at the beginning, and then once you've used that 2 week allotment, that's all you get. So even if you get sick now and then in the fall you get sick again, you only get 2 weeks of leave. The emergency FMLA only comes into play when you need to take time off to care for a child whose school or daycare is closed or unavailable.
Thanks. Second question. To help keep medical benefit costs down, should smaller companies look at professional employer organizations?
That's another good question, and I think that's probably a little bit too deep for us to get into in this scenario. So that's probably something we could address better offline.
Okay, we can do that. Thanks.
Thanks.
Brian, thoughts?
Yeah, Jamie, I'll just real quickly address the PEO question. I think we need to evaluate as a business leader all of the potential options that we have for purchasing healthcare. The PEO model is certainly an option. There's advantages to it. There's also some disadvantages. So I think to really get a handle on potential rising healthcare costs, or rising health insurance premiums rather, we need to get a handle on healthcare costs. So the models that we find most advantageous are the models that really support an employer managing that healthcare supply chain. And so looking at models, there are ways to pool employers, small groups, and still allow that flexibility and autonomy to really manage the health plan. So it certainly is worth exploring and looking at, but I think there are some pros and cons that really need to be evaluated. Melissa mentioned the student loan provision as a part of the CARES Act, and that's a big deal for any employer who may be reassessing their talent attraction and retention efforts on the other side of the curve. Student loan assistance has proven to be a highly sought after benefit. And now that it's tax advantaged, at least for 2020, employers can begin to capitalize on the opportunity to differentiate their benefits package and really set themselves apart in the labor market. So the question becomes, how do you pay for it, right? Well, I mentioned earlier that leaders should manage the supply chain of their healthcare spend. And we're finding that employers who have proactive healthcare purchasing strategies are lowering overall costs anywhere from 10 to as high as 30%, while at the same time enhancing both the quality of care and the overall employee satisfaction with the health plan. So whether you're fully insured or self-insured today, we would recommend evaluating how you're purchasing healthcare and conducting a claims risk assessment to really pinpoint those high-risk areas and some of the high potential savings opportunities. We believe leaders who are proactive in addressing those risks will be the ones coming out stronger on the other side of the curve.
Thanks, Brian. John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just quickly, just to jump off of what Brian and Melissa said. Yeah, now is a great time to think about talent attraction. Although recruiting may be on pause, everyone is sitting at home and nobody is monitoring their conversations. So it can be a great time to look at those passive candidates and start a quiet conversation if you have those critical roles you're needing to fill. And I don't want to underestimate the early career talent, as Brian and Melissa said. It's a great time to build a program, an attractive program to, they can be a great resource for recent college grads for your business. Secondly, reprioritize, whether it's through IDS or your own methodology. HR is really great on taking on more initiatives instead of stopping and prioritizing the most important ones to drive the business forward. So take time to reprioritize. And then lastly, agile principles, I think, are becoming more and more important. So just remember that the outcome or having a working prototype is more important than all of the activity that goes on behind the scenes. So push your teams toward having a working prototype in this kind of environment is going to take you so much further. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Mark, your thoughts?
Briefly, I got two comments I'd like to make. Companies really need to take a look at their websites as to their expanded capabilities, such as if they get into the PPE, either short-term or long-term. In order for people such as our center's marketing research team, they can better do supplier scouting and find those products and services online, and helping again, to widen the supply chain a little bit more. The other thing I want to mention is just refer to an article on thomas.net by Dickinson Bransford, and it's 16 immediate actions company owners should take to protect their businesses' financial health during COVID-19. This is a very, very good article. It's comprehensive, and it really falls into the EOS footprint, and I encourage people to go to thomas.net. I think the article was posted a day or two ago, but take a look at that. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Mark. All right, David, bring us home.
Okay, so my urging to everyone and encouragement is to lead and be the leadership team that your organization deserves. Remember, uncertainty is not the same as chaos. Go back to the 5 leadership abilities that you learned in your focus day. Simplify by making sure you as leaders are protecting the rest of the organization, your vendors, and your customers from the complexity of uncertainty. Don't wait until you have clarity to make a perfect decision, because you're not going to find it. Get in the 80% range, make a decision, and move on. It's really easy to get analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis during this time period. So please help each other avoid that. Everyone knows that things are changing, but you'll lower your stress and increase performance if you lead. Dust off your EOS tools you've been using in the old model of normal operating, and you may want to do a cash flow driver exercises, redo elevate and delegate based on reduced staff or what you're having to do today. Please, I urge you to take your clarity breaks, which is different than us all binging on Netflix and things like that, but purposeful clarity breaks are just absolutely sanity enhancers. Change your meeting pulse, including L10s, to give more frequent yet shorter communication and contact. Don't skip your quarterlies. It's still important to predict and to create the stability of a futuristic message to the organization. Change your scorecards to reflect today's reality and what your leading indicator activities are. Create a reverse accountability chart. If leaders and managers are doing more task work, make sure you get the essential deliveries to customers and drive accountabilities. Stay positive, be a unified team of equals, and you can accomplish anything that you focus on.
Thanks, David. A couple of questions. So can you do your EOS work, so a 90, if somebody was interested, or even a focus day, can you do those things remotely now?
Absolutely, doing them every day.
Great. So still able to engage with all of you.
Even sessions we're doing remotely, and we've got some technologies through the EOS community that's helping us to do that very effectively.
Excellent. Okay, well, we are coming up to time. We will email out a link to this recording, as well as all the panelists' contact information, so you can contact them directly if you have further questions. I want to thank everybody who participated. I want to thank our panelists. We hope you found this beneficial. Please feel free to reach out to any of us or all of us with further questions, and everybody stay home, stay healthy, stay safe.